The conference hall on Apex Prime Station stretched for nearly a kilometer, its walls made of crystalline material that shifted colors with the mood of the assembled delegates. Today, those walls pulsed an angry red. Commander Taiwan watched the live broadcast from his quarters aboard the UNSC Horizon, his face expressionless as the drama unfolded. 300 light-years away, Dr. Hannah stood alone in the center of the chamber. Surrounded by the 12 species that composed the Galactic Council, she was small compared to most of them. The Varelian sovereign towered above her, its chitinous body clicking and scraping as it moved on 6 powerful legs. The Marathi High Speaker floated nearby, a being of pure, crystalline structure that hummed with internal light. Around them sat representatives of races that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, and they all looked at Hannah with the same expression, contempt. "The evidence is clear," the Varelian sovereign announced, its voice translated into crackling human speech by the station's systems. "Humanity has violated the Outer Reaches Treaty. Your mining operations have depleted 3 protected resource zones. This is an act of aggression against the Council's authority." Hannah's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. "With respect, Sovereign, those zones were not marked on any star charts we received. We believed them to be unclaimed space. If there was a violation, it was unintentional. We are willing to cease all operations and negotiate proper boundaries." A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the chamber. The Marathi High Speaker's crystalline form chimed like breaking glass. "Ignorance is not innocence, human. Your species has been part of this council for 15 years. In that time, you have proven yourselves to be aggressive, expansionist, and disrespectful of established order. We have been patient. That patience is now exhausted." On the horizon, Taiwan leaned forward. Something in the speaker's tone bothered him. This felt rehearsed, prepared. He pulled up the intelligence reports his team had compiled over the past months. There had been minor incidents, yes, but nothing that warranted this kind of response. Unless the council wanted a response like this, back in the chamber, Hannah tried again. "We can resolve this peacefully. Humanity values its place in the galactic community. We're willing to pay reparations, establish clear boundaries, whatever is needed to maintain peace." Peace. The Varelian sovereign moved closer, looming over her. "You speak of peace while your ships multiply like bacteria across our space. You breed faster than any civilized species. You consume resources at an alarming rate. You are a disease, Dr. Hannah, and diseases must be cauterized before they spread." The chamber erupted in sounds of agreement. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries now nodded in unison. Hannah felt her stomach drop. This wasn't about mining violations. This was about fear. The Council saw humanity's rapid expansion, their population growth, their hunger for new worlds, and they saw a threat to their ancient order. "I call for a vote," the Marathi High Speaker announced. "The question before this council is simple. Do we take action to contain the human threat, or do we allow them to continue unchecked?" Hannah wanted to object, to point out that calling them a threat was already deciding the outcome, but she knew it was pointless. One by one, the council members voted. 12 voices, 12 species, 12 votes for the same thing. War. By unanimous decision, the Varelian sovereign declared, "This council hereby demands that humanity withdraw all vessels, stations, and colonies to your home system within 72 hours. Any human presence beyond the Sol system after that deadline will be considered an act of war and dealt with accordingly. This session is concluded." The broadcast cut off. Taiwan sat in silence for a moment, then activated his communication panel. Within seconds, he was connected to Captain Dayung, whose weathered face appeared on the screen. "You watched it?" Dayung asked. "Every word," Taiwan replied. "They're not giving us a choice. 72 hours to abandon everything we've built out here." Dong's jaw tightened. "We have 300,000 colonists on the outer worlds. Mining operations, research stations, families who've lived out here for years. They expect us to just leave them. They expect us to surrender," Taiwan said quietly. "This isn't about the mining violations. This is about putting us in our place. showing the galaxy what happens when a young species gets too ambitious. On Earth, emergency sessions were already convening. Every government, every military command, every major organization was scrambling to respond. The news spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council had declared war. Most people couldn't believe it. 15 years of peaceful cooperation, and now this. Admiral G1 stood in the command center deep beneath Sol, watching the tactical displays update in real time. Reports flooded in from human ships across known space. Some were already beginning to pull back following the Council's demands. Others waited for orders, their captains uncertain what to do. "Ma'am," one of her officers said, "we're receiving a priority message from Dr. Hannah. She's requesting emergency evacuation from Apex Prime." "Grant it," G1 said immediately. "Get her out of there." "What's the status of our defensive fleet?" "All ships are on high alert. We have approximately 400 vessels of various classes. It's most concentrated around Earth and Mars. The outer colonies have minimal protection. 400 ships. Gi-wan knew the Council had tens of thousands. Their technology was more advanced, their shields stronger, their weapons more powerful. On paper, this was no contest. Humanity would be crushed within weeks, maybe days. But Gi-wan had not risen to her position by accepting defeat. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion, had seen seemingly impossible situations turn around through determination and clever thinking. She pulled up her command roster and started making calls. Across human space, the evacuation began. Ships streamed toward the Sol system, carrying colonists and their belongings. Some people wept, watching their homes disappear behind them. Others were angry, demanding to know why humanity was running. But most understood the grim reality. The Council had given them an ultimatum. Backed by overwhelming force, Taewan stood on the bridge of the horizon as it moved to escort a group of colony ships. His crew worked efficiently, but he could feel their fear. They were all thinking the same thing. "What happens when 72 hours are up?" "Commander," his tactical officer reported. "We're detecting Council ships moving into formation near the outer reaches. Looks like they're establishing a blockade." "How many ships?" "Preliminary count suggests 500 vessels, sir. They're not hiding their movements." 500 ships for a blockade. The Council wanted humanity to see their strength, to understand how hopeless resistance would be. Taewan studied the formation patterns on his display. The ships were arranged in traditional Council fashion, massive formations designed to maximize their shield coverage and firepower. It was the way they had fought for thousands of years, the way they had conquered every species that opposed them. But the Council had never fought humanity before. They had never encountered a species that had spent its entire existence at war with itself. Humans understood conflict in a way these ancient races had forgotten. They knew hunger, desperation, survival. They knew how to fight dirty. Taewan opened a secure channel to Admiral Ji-won. When her face appeared, he could see the determination in her eyes. "They think this will be easy," he said. Ji-won smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then they're going to learn something about us. Something important." "What's that, Admiral?" "Humans don't know how to surrender. We never have." The 72-hour countdown began. Across the galaxy, the Council prepared for what they believed would be a quick demonstration of power. On Earth, humanity prepared for something else entirely. They prepared for war, real war. The kind they had practiced on each other for 10,000 years. The Council had made their declaration. They would soon receive humanity's reply. It would be written in fire and blood and stubborn. It's a breakable will. The Marathi war prince believed this would be over quickly. He commanded the First Fleet, 500 of the Council's finest warships, and he had never known defeat. His crystalline body pulsed with confident light as he surveyed the tactical display. Before him lay the human colony of New Horizon, a small settlement on the edge of claimed space. It would be the first to fall, a message to the humans about the cost of defiance. 72 hours had passed. Not all human ships had returned to the Sol system. Some remained, scattered across the outer territories. The war prince saw this as foolishness. These stragglers would be swept aside, and then his fleet would advance to Earth itself. All ships, he commanded, assume attack formation. We will demonstrate proper military discipline to these primitives. The Council fleet moved into position, a massive wall of ships arranged in precise geometric patterns. Their shields overlapped, creating a nearly impenetrable barrier. Their weapons charged, ready to reduce the human colony to ash. This was how the Council fought, with overwhelming power and perfect coordination. But the human ships didn't form up to meet them. Instead, they scattered. Captain Nara watched her display as the Council fleet approached. She commanded a small frigate, the Defiant, with a crew of just 40 people. Around her, 24 similar ships spread out across the system, refusing to group together. "They're expecting us to fight like them," she said to her tactical officer. "Big formations, shield walls, honorable combat. That's not how we do this." Her orders from Admiral G1 had been clear. Make them bleed. Don't fight fair. Don't give them the battle they expect. Make every victory cost more than they want to pay. The War Prince watched in confusion as the human ships refused to engage. Happily, they darted between asteroids, used planets for cover, and launched long-range missiles before retreating. It was cowardly, dishonorable behavior. "Pursue them," he ordered. "We will force them to stand and fight." But the humans wouldn't stand. Every time Council ships gave chase, the humans led them into traps. Mines hidden in asteroid fields. Ambushes from behind planetary rings. Small, fast ships that struck at vulnerable points and vanished before the Council could respond. Na-Ra led her squadron in a daring strike on a Council supply ship. The massive vessel was protected by escorts, but it was slow, and its shields were designed to stop frontal assaults. Her frigates came from above and below, launching kinetic missiles that punched through weak points in the shield coverage. The supply ship exploded, taking 2 escort vessels with it. "Target destroyed," her tactical officer reported. "Council ships are pursuing, then we run," Nara said calmly. "Lead them toward the debris field. Let's see how well their fancy shields handle obstacles at high speed." On Earth, Engineer Kyungmin worked frantically in a secure facility beneath the Gobi Desert. He was young for his position, barely 30, but his mind worked in ways that impressed even the most experienced scientists. Right now, he was solving a problem: how to hurt ships that were more advanced than anything humanity could build. The answer was simple. Really. Don't try to match their technology. Use what humans were good at: violence, creativity, and a willingness to try things others considered too dangerous or too crude. "The orbital platforms are ready," he reported to Admiral Juwan via secure connection. "Tungsten rods, just like we discussed. No explosives, no complex systems, just metal and gravity. Will it work?" G1 asked. "Against their shields?" "No, but their shields won't be up over their own staging areas. They don't expect attacks on their rear positions. That's the advantage of fighting someone who hasn't had a real war in 1,000 years. They've forgotten to be paranoid." Kyungmin activated the satellites. High above New Horizons' largest moon, weapons platforms that looked like simple communications arrays began to fire. Tungsten rods, each one weighing several tons, dropped toward the surface where the Council had established a forward base. The rods accelerated, reaching incredible speeds before impact. The Council base didn't have shields active. Why would it? They were in secured territory, far from any combat zone. The rods struck like the fist of an angry god, each impact releasing energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. In seconds, the entire base was obliterated. The War Prince stared at his tactical display in disbelief. How? How did they strike our rear positions? His intelligence officer, a Vrelian named Ketch, clicked its mandibles nervously. "It appears they used kinetic bombardment." War Prince. "Simple mass, accelerated by gravity. Our sensors didn't classify it as a threat because there were no energy signatures." "Primitives," the War Prince hissed. "Fighting with rocks and hiding like cowards. This is not warfare." But it was warfare. It was human warfare, honed over millennia of fighting each other. Humans didn't care about honor or proper tactics. They cared about winning and surviving. Captain Daejun commanded the carrier Indomitable, an aging vessel that had seen service during the resource wars on Mars. His flight deck launched wave after wave of fighters, small craft that the Council barely considered threats. But those fighters didn't try to dogfight the superior Council ships. Instead, they targeted communication relays, sensor arrays, and supply lines. The Council's perfect coordination began to break down. Ships lost contact with their command structure. Supply vessels were picked off one by one. What should have been a simple advance turned into a frustrating chase through hostile space, with losses mounting and objectives unclear. Warprints, Ketch reported. We've lost 17 ships so far. The humans refuse to engage in proper combat. They're using guerrilla tactics. 17 ships against primitives. The Warprince's light pulsed an angry red. This is unacceptable. Deploy the heavy battle groups. We'll burn them out of every hiding place. The Council committed more ships, larger vessels, with more powerful weapons. They began systematically destroying asteroids, burning away cover, trying to force the humans into open battle. And slowly, it began to work. Human ships had nowhere left to hide. Nara's ship took a glancing hit from a Council cruiser, her shields failing and hull breaching in 3 places. Emergency alarms screamed across the bridge. Hull damage on decks 2 and 4, her officer reported. Shield generators are offline. We can't take another hit like that, Nara looked at her display. 24 Council ships were converging on her position. There was no escape route. This was it. She opened a channel to Admiral G1. Admiral, this is Defiant. We're trapped in Sector 7. No way out. Guwan's face was grim on the screen. Can you make it count, Captain? Nara understood. She looked at her crew, saw the fear in their eyes, but also the determination. They knew what was being asked of them. Yes, ma'am. We can make it count. She turned to her crew. Set course for that Council dreadnought. Ramming speed. Transfer all remaining power to engines. The Defiant turned toward the massive Council ship that led the pursuing force. It was 50 times her size, a vessel that had served the Council for 300 years. But Nara's ship was fast. And the Council didn't expect suicide tactics. The Defiant struck the dreadnought's shield generator at full speed. The frigate disintegrated, but the impact overloaded the dreadnought's systems. Its shields collapsed. And in that moment, a dozen human ships that had been waiting in the debris field opened fire. The dreadnought died, torn apart by concentrated fire. It was the first capital ship the Council had lost in living memory. The War Prince watched in horror as one of his most powerful vessels exploded. These humans traded ships like they meant nothing, sacrificed themselves without hesitation. What kind of species fought this way? Withdraw, he ordered. Pull back to the rally point. We need to reassess. The First Fleet retreated, leaving the New Horizon system behind. They had technically won, driving the humans out of the area, but the cost was staggering. 53 ships lost, including the dreadnought. The humans had lost more, but they seemed willing to trade at any ratio. On the Council's homeworlds, the news was met with shock. The First Fleet was supposed to crush the humans in days. Instead, they had been mauled by guerrilla tactics and weapons that seemed almost primitive. The Vrelian sovereign demanded answers. The Marathi High Speaker insisted on a larger commitment. This changes nothing, the sovereign announced to the Council. We will send the 3rd and 7th fleets. 2,000 ships. The humans cannot stand against such force. But in the quiet chambers, where Council members spoke privately, doubt began to creep in. These humans fought differently than anyone the Council had faced before. They didn't care about honor or proper warfare. They cared only about making the Council pay for every inch of space. On Earth, Admiral Giwan reviewed the battle reports. The losses hurt. Nara had been talented, and her sacrifice had bought a crucial victory. But Giwan knew they couldn't sustain this. The Council had vastly more ships, more resources. Eventually, the numbers would tell, but they had proven something important. The Council could be hurt. Their ships could be destroyed. Their arrogance could be punctured. And that knowledge spread across human space like wildfire. Turning fear into determination, the War Prince's first fleet had learned a painful lesson. But the Council was about to commit an even larger force. Convinced that overwhelming numbers would succeed where the First Fleet had struggled. They still didn't understand what they were fighting. They still thought this was about ships and weapons. They would learn.
Soon enough that humans fight with more than technology.
They fight with rage and grief and stubborn refusal to submit. The Council had declared war expecting quick surrender. Instead, they were learning what it meant to fight a species that had never known peace. Scientist Bomb had never expected to become important to the war effort. She was a physicist, someone who studied energy fields and quantum mechanics in comfortable laboratories. But when the first damaged Council ship was captured by Corporal Sung-hoon's Marines, she found herself staring at technology that made her hands shake with excitement. "This is incredible," she whispered, examining the shield generator. "It's so elegant, but also so predictable." Commander Taewon stood beside her in the captured vessel's engineering bay. The Marathi cruiser had been crippled by concentrated human fire and boarded before it could self-destruct. Now it drifted in a secure area of the asteroid belt, surrounded by human vessels, while Bomb and her team studied its systems. "Predictable how?" Taewon asked. Bomb pointed at the generator's core. "Look at this. The shield operates on a fixed frequency. It's incredibly powerful on that frequency, almost impossible to penetrate. But it never changes. Why would it? The Council has used this technology for thousands of years. No one has ever forced them to adapt. Can we exploit that?" "Yes." Bomb's eyes gleamed. "If we can build weapons that frequency hop, cycling through different wavelengths, we can slip through their shields. It won't work perfectly, but it'll work better than what we have now." She sent her findings to Engineer Kyungmin on Earth. Within days, human factories were retrofitting missiles with frequency-hopping warheads. It was crude compared to Council technology, but humans had always been good at crude and effective. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Yujin worked in a darkened room aboard the command station orbiting Mars. She was surrounded by displays showing encrypted Council communications. For weeks, she had been trying to crack their codes. And finally, the patterns started to make sense. "Got you," she muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The Council used what they believed was an unbreakable encryption system, built on mathematical principles that took quantum computers to solve. But they had been using the same system for centuries. And Yujin had something the Council didn't account for: desperation and human stubbornness. She had been working 18-hour days, running every captured communication through every algorithm she could think of. The breakthrough came when she realized the Council's encryption assumed no one would try brute force attacks. Such attacks were considered primitive, wasteful. But humanity had computing power to waste, and they were willing to throw everything at the problem. "Admiral," she reported to G1, "I can read their fleet movements. Not everything, but enough to give us advance warning."
"How grimly."
"Good, because we're going to need every advantage we can get." The 3rd and 7th fleets were approaching. Over 2,000 Council ships under the command of a Vrelian admiral named Threx. Unlike the War Prince, Threx had studied the reports from the First Fleet. He knew the humans used unconventional tactics. He was prepared for guerrilla warfare, or so he thought. Captain Daejung stood on the bridge of his carrier, the Indomitable, watching the Council fleet approach on his displays. They were moving cautiously, screening their advance with scout ships, maintaining tight formations to prevent ambushes. "They learned," he said to his tactical officer. "They're not giving us easy targets anymore." "What do we do, Captain?" Daejung studied the tactical situation. The Council fleet was advancing on Mars, clearly intending to use it as a stepping stone to Earth. Mars was heavily defended, but not enough to stop 2,000 ships. The smart move would be to fall back, preserve forces, defend Earth directly. But Daejung had not survived the Mars Rebellion by making smart moves. "We're going to give them exactly what they don't expect," he said. "We're going to attack," he sent out orders across the human fleet. Ships that had been hiding in the asteroid belt, preparing for defensive operations, suddenly changed course. They formed up not in council-style formations, but in loose groupings that could react and adapt, and they headed straight for the advancing council fleet. Admiral Threx watched in disbelief as human ships emerged from cover and moved to engage. This made no sense. The humans had every advantage in defensive positions. Why would they attack? It's a trick, he told his officers. They're trying to draw us into a trap. But it wasn't a trick. The human fleet struck the Council's advance guard with savage intensity. Kalman's new frequency-hopping missiles punched through shields that should have been impenetrable. Human fighters swarmed Council ships, targeting weak points that Bomb's team had identified from studying the captured cruiser. The Battle of the Belt began in earnest. Corporal Sang-hoon led a boarding team onto a damaged Council destroyer. The Vrelian crew fought back, but they were not prepared for close-quarters combat. The Council species saw boarding actions as primitive, something civilized races didn't do. But Sang-hoon's Marines had trained for exactly this kind of fighting. Clear deck by deck, Sang-hoon ordered. Secure their data cores. We need everything we can get. The fighting was brutal. Varelian warriors were strong and vicious. Humans fought with a desperation born from knowing their entire species was at stake. Every ship captured, every data core secured, every piece of technology learned was one more advantage in a war they could not afford to lose. On Mars, defensive platforms opened fire as Council ships pushed closer. The Red Planet had been transformed into a fortress, its orbital space filled with weapons platforms, minefields, and defensive stations. The Council had the numbers, but they had to push through a meat grinder to reach their objective. A Council battleship broke through the outer defenses, its massive guns targeting the main defensive station. The station's shields held for a moment, then collapsed under the sustained barrage. The battleship prepared to fire again, to deliver the killing blow, then Daeung's carrier, the Indomitable, rammed it. The elderly carrier was already crippled, its engines damaged and half its hull breached. But Daejeong pointed it at the battleship and ordered maximum thrust. The impact was catastrophic. Both ships died in a ball of fire and debris, but from the carrier's launch bays, the final seconds before impact, the last fighters launched. Pilots who knew they had nowhere to land, that their carrier was about to die, still climbed into their cockpits and launched. They struck at Council ships with suicidal fury, trading their lives for any damage they could inflict. The Council began to understand something terrible. Humans did not value their lives the way Council species did. They would sacrifice themselves without hesitation if it hurt the enemy. This was not warfare as the Council understood it. This was something primal and terrifying. Admiral Threx watched his casualty reports climb. Hundreds of ships damaged, dozens destroyed. The humans were losing more, yes, but they seemed to have an infinite capacity for sacrifice. And his fleet was still thousands of light years from Earth, still fighting for Mars. Pull back, he ordered. Regroup at the rally point. But Eugen had read his orders before he even sent them. Human ships were waiting at his rally point. The ambush cost him another 50 vessels before his fleet could escape. Kyung Dashmin watched the battle from Earth, making adjustments to his weapons in real time based on combat data. He was exhausted, having barely slept in weeks, but he kept working. Every percentage point of improved effectiveness meant lives saved, ships preserved. Frequency hopping is working, he reported to Bomb, but they're starting to adapt. We need something else. I have an idea, Bomb said. She had been studying the quantum-linked systems the Council used for communication. What if we don't try to penetrate their shields at all? What if we overload them? She explained her concept, linked mines that would detonate in cascading patterns, each explosion triggering the next. The shields would block each individual explosion easily, but the cumulative energy buildup might overload their systems. It's risky, Kungmin said. The timing has to be perfect. Everything about this war is risky, Bomb replied. Let's build it. They worked together, scientist and engineer, creating weapons that the Council had never imagined because they seemed too crude. Too dangerous, too likely to kill the user. But humans were fine with dangerous. They were fine with crude. They needed weapons that worked, not weapons that were elegant. The Council 3rd and 7th Fleets regrouped and advanced again. This time, they moved more carefully, having learned to respect human desperation. They bypassed Mars, leaving it besieged but intact, and headed for Earth itself. Commander Tae-won, promoted to admiral after his previous commander died at Mars, prepared Earth's final defenses. The planet was ringed with platforms, mines, ships, and weapons. Every asteroid that could be moved had been positioned as a defensive barrier. Every human ship that could still fly was there. "They're coming," he said to his bridge crew. "All of them. This is where we make our stand." The Council fleet entered the Sol system expecting to find a broken, desperate enemy. Instead, they found a fortress. And when they advanced to attack, they ran straight into bomb and Min's quantum-linked mines. The explosions cascaded through the Council formation. Ships' shields overloaded and collapsed. Human vessels, waiting in ambush, opened fire on the suddenly vulnerable enemy. The battle became chaos, ships exploding, debris filling space. Both sides locked in a struggle that neither could afford to lose. Admiral Threx sent a desperate message to the Council. "We need reinforcements. The humans are fighting like madmen. Our losses are severe." But the Council was already having second thoughts. The war was costing far more than they had anticipated. And on the Council's homeworlds, other species were watching, seeing that the mighty Council could be hurt, could be made to bleed. The battle raged for weeks, the longest sustained combat the galaxy had seen in millennia. When it finally ended, the Council had technically won. They had pushed human forces back, damaged Earth's defenses. But they had lost over 60% of their fleet. 2,000 ships had entered the Sol system. Fewer than 800 survived to retreat. On Earth, the skies were dark with smoke from burning orbital stations. Billions were dead. Cities were damaged. But the planet still stood. Defiant and unbroken, Admiral Tae-won stood in the ruins of the Orbital Command Center, looking down at the scarred planet below. His face was covered in blood from a head wound, and his uniform was torn, but he was alive. Humanity was alive. "Send a message to all surviving human forces," he said quietly. "Tell them we held. Earth still stands. We're still here." The message spread across human space, carried by the few remaining ships and stations. Despite everything, despite the losses and the pain and the death, humanity had not surrendered. The Council had thrown their might against Earth and failed to break it. But everyone knew this was not over. The Council would come again, with even more ships. And next time, humanity might not survive. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was not going well. The Vrelian sovereign's chitinous body trembled with rage as casualty reports scrolled across the displays. The Marathi High Speaker's crystalline form pulsed with angry red light. Around them, the other Council species sat in stunned silence. 60% losses, the sovereign hissed. Against primitives who have barely left their homeworld? "This is unacceptable," Marathi High Speaker chimed in agreement. "We underestimated them. We thought this would be a simple demonstration of power. Instead, we have shown the galaxy that the Council can be hurt." That was the real problem, and everyone in the chamber knew it. For thousands of years, the Council had maintained order through the perception of invincibility. Young species joined because they believed resistance was futile. But now, humanity had proven that the Council could bleed. And across the galaxy, other species were taking notice. "We must commit everything," the Vrelian sovereign declared. 12 fleets. 40,000 ships. "We will burn Earth to ash and make an example that will last for millennia." The vote was unanimous, but several Council members voted with less enthusiasm than before. The war was becoming expensive both in ships and in political capital, but there was no turning back now. To admit defeat against humanity would mean the end of the Council's authority on Earth. President Yoonji stood at the window of her emergency command center, looking out at a world that was both broken and unbroken. The cities still stood, but they were scarred. The people still lived, but they mourned millions of dead. And somewhere out there, the Council was preparing to come again. "They're going to send everything," Admiral Tae-won said behind her. Our intelligence suggests 12 fleets. It's more ships than we can possibly fight. How long do we have? Yunji asked. 8 months? Maybe 6, maybe less. They need time to gather their forces, coordinate between species. But when they come, they won't make the same mistakes. They'll bombard us from orbit, bypass our defenses, focus on destroying Earth itself. Yunji turned to face him. Taewon looked exhausted, his face still bearing scars from the last battle. They all looked like that now, the survivors. Worn down, pushed to their limits, but somehow still standing. Can we win? She asked quietly. Taewon was silent for a long moment. No, he finally said. Not if we try to fight them the same way. We need to change the game. In a hidden facility on the dark side of the moon, Elder Hyobin studied tactical maps with a group of strategic advisors. Hyobin was old, had retired from military service decades ago, but the war had called her back. She had fought in more conflicts than anyone else alive, had seen humanity at its worst and its best. The Council is making a mistake, she said, pointing at the projected fleet movements. They're committing everything to destroy us. But that means they're leaving their homeworlds vulnerable. We don't have ships to strike at their homeworlds, one of the advisors objected. Our fleet is barely holding together. We don't need to strike at their homeworlds, Hyobin said with a slight smile. We just need to make the Council species question whether this war is worth it. She explained her plan. It was risky, perhaps insane. But it was the kind of strategy that might work precisely because the Council would never expect it. Meanwhile, Ambassador Jae-sung was working through back channels, using neutral species to communicate with moderates in the Council governments. Many Council species were not happy with the war. They had been told it would be quick and easy. Instead, it had dragged on for months and cost thousands of ships. But their governments were committed, and dissent was dangerous. There are cracks, Jae-sung reported to President Yoonji. The Varelians and Marathi have a history of conflict. Right now, they're united against us. But that unity is fragile. If we can exploit it, do it, Yoonji said. Use whatever methods you think will work. We need the Council divided. Commander So-hee led humanity's deep space reconnaissance wing. Her ships were small, fast, and equipped with experimental stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to Council sensors. For months they had been operating deep behind Council lines, gathering intelligence and preparing for a mission that might change everything. We're in position, So-hee reported from her command ship. All targets are confirmed. Waiting for authorization. Authorization came from Admiral Taewon himself. Execute Operation Fracture. So-hee's ships struck simultaneously at logistics hubs across Council space. They didn't attack military targets that would have been impossible with their small force. Instead, they targeted the supply lines that kept the Council fleets operational. Fuel depots exploded. Food shipments for non-compatible species were swapped, creating shortages and confusion. Communication networks were sabotaged with viruses that seemed to come from other Council species. And carefully, very carefully, So-hee's intelligence officers planted evidence that the Varelians were hoarding resources from the Marathi, and vice versa. The Council fleet began to gather at the staging area near the outer reaches. 12 fleets, representing all the major Council species, coming together for the final assault on Earth. It was the largest military force assembled in 3,000 years, but tensions were rising. Varelian captains complained that Marathi ships were taking more than their share of fuel. Marathi commanders accused Varelians of deliberately delaying to let others take the brunt of the casualties. Other species watched nervously, remembering old rivalries that predated the Council itself. Ambassador Jae-sung's careful leaks to moderate Council. Citizens began to bear fruit. On the Varelian homeworld, protests erupted when the true casualty figures were revealed. Families who had been told their loved ones died gloriously learned the truth. They had died fighting an enemy who refused to surrender. In a war that served no purpose except Council pride, the Marathi worlds went dark, their crystalline cities dimming in a traditional sign of mourning and protest. The Council leadership tried to suppress the information, but it was too late. The galaxy was seeing the cost of this war. On Earth, Engineer Kyungmin prepared his final surprise. He called it the Horizon Line, a network of defensive satellites that used technology captured from Council ships. They wouldn't stop the coming assault, but they might buy time. Scientist Bomb worked alongside him, both of them running on stimulants and determination. She had lost her family in the last battle. Her home city had been hit by orbital strikes, but she kept working because that's what humans did. They kept going. If this doesn't work, Kyungmin said quietly, I want you to know, it's been an honor. It's going to work, Bomb said. It has to. The Council fleet began its final approach to the Sol system. 40,000 ships, moving in coordinated formations that had been practiced for centuries. They expected heavy resistance, but they had the numbers and the firepower to overcome anything humanity could deploy. What they didn't expect was for humanity to start broadcasting. Captain Mina's stealth ship had infiltrated Apex Prime Station during a council session. With Yujin guiding her remotely, Mina's team hacked into the council's communication network, and then they broadcast everything to every council world. Simultaneously, the broadcasts showed the true battle footage from the war. Council ships destroyed. Council soldiers dying. Human cities burning, yes, but also the staggering cost of making those cities burn. They showed the casualty lists that council governments had suppressed. They showed the truth about what this war really was, not a quick demonstration of power, but a brutal conflict with no end in sight. And they showed human civilians. Families mourning their dead, children who had lost parents. They made the council citizens see their enemy not as a disease to be cauterized, but as people. People who were fighting for their survival. The galaxy watched. And across council space, something unprecedented happened. The people began to question their leaders. On the Vrelian homeworld, riots broke out. Families demanded to know why their children were dying to punish a species that only wanted to exist. The Varelian sovereign tried to suppress the protests, but they spread too fast. The Marathi worlds went completely dark. Entire planets refusing to provide power to military operations. The Marathi High Speaker demanded they comply, but the crystalline beings simply refused. They would not contribute to more death in the Council fleet. Vrelian Admiral Threx and Marathi Admiral Krentha faced each other on a shared command channel. The tension between their species had been building for weeks. Your species is hoarding fuel, Krentha accused. Your ships are refusing to take the vanguard positions, Threx shot back. You want us to absorb the casualties while you hold back. Perhaps we should all hold back, Krentha said quietly. This war has cost both our peoples dearly. For what? To punish primitives who had the audacity to exist? Threx was silent. He had lost 3 clutches of offspring in this war. 3 generations of his family, dead fighting humans who refused to surrender. And for what? The Council fleet hesitated at the edge of the Sol system. Orders came from the Council leadership, advance and destroy Earth, but the orders were no longer unanimous. Some Council species were withdrawing their fleets, declaring they would not participate in what was being called genocide on Earth. The defenses were ready. Every human ship that could fly was in position. Every weapon was armed. They would fight to the last, make the Council pay for every meter of space. But then, incredibly, the Council fleet began to withdraw. Not all of it. The Vrelians and Marathi still advanced, determined to salvage something from this disaster. But half the Council fleet was pulling back, species declaring they would not be part of this anymore. The battle that followed was still brutal. The Vrelian and Marathi forces pushed hard, trying to break through Earth's defenses. They came closer than any previous attack, their ships reaching the upper atmosphere before being driven back by desperate human resistance. Kyungmin's Horizon Line satellites performed beyond expectations. Their captured Council technology turned against its makers. Bomb's quantum mines created havoc in the enemy formations, and human ships battered and barely holding together, fought with the fury of those protecting their last home. When the Vrelian and Marathi forces finally withdrew, they had lost another 2,000 ships. Earth was damaged, its orbital infrastructure in ruins, but the planet survived. Humanity survived, and in the Council chamber, The Varelian sovereign and Marathi high speaker faced their colleagues' accusations. The other species demanded answers. Why had this war been necessary? What had they achieved except to weaken the council and embolden other young species? The vote was close, but it was final. The council would seek peace with humanity. The war was over, not because humanity had won militarily, but because the council could no longer maintain unity. The galaxy waited for humanity's response. The council had sent their formal ceasefire proposal, offering to end hostilities if humanity agreed to certain restrictions on their expansion. It was not peace, not really. It was the council trying to save face, to maintain some semblance of their authority even as their unity crumbled. President Unjay read the proposal in her office beneath the ruins of what had once been Geneva. The building above was gone, destroyed in the final battle, but the command center deep underground remained functional. Around her, advisors argued about how to respond. "They're offering very little," one advisor said. "We'd still be restricted to a small sector of space. Our expansion would be limited for the next century. But the war would be over," another countered. "We've lost so much. Billions dead. Our fleet is shattered. If we accept, we can rebuild." Yunji listened to them argue, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about Commander Taewan's words from months ago. Humanity doesn't know how to surrender. Had they come this far just to accept the council's terms and remain subservient? "No," she said quietly, and the room fell silent. "No, we're not accepting this." "Madam President," an advisor began, "if we refuse, the war continues. We can't survive another major assault." "We're not going to fight another major assault," Yonji said. "We're going to change the rules one last time." She called for Admiral Taewan, Dr. Hannah, and Elder Hyobin. Together, they crafted humanity's reply to the council. It would not be a message of submission or negotiation. It would be something else entirely. Across the galaxy. Dr. Hannah had been working underground during the war, making contacts with moderate council species and documenting everything that had happened. She had evidence of war crimes, of council ships targeting civilian centers, of the casual cruelty with which the ancient species had tried to exterminate humanity. But she also had something more powerful, the stories of council citizens who had protested the war, who had lost loved ones, who had begun to question whether their governments truly represented them. "We can't just survive this," Hannah told the others. "We need to make sure it never happens again. Not to us, not to any species." Elder Hyobin nodded in agreement. The council's power came from fear and the perception of invincibility. We've shattered that perception. Now we need to offer something better. Commander Taewan, now Admiral Taewan, looked at the tactical displays showing the scattered remnants of humanity's fleet. Ships held together with temporary patches, crews exhausted beyond measure, weapons running low on ammunition. They had survived, but just barely. "If we push too hard," he warned, "the council might unite again. We need to be careful." "We will be," Yongji assured him. "But we will not be weak." Captain Mina prepared for her most important mission yet. Her stealth ship, the Whisper, would carry Ambassador Jae-sung and scientists bomb to Apex Prime Station. It was a dangerous journey through space that was technically still hostile, but it was necessary. "Are you sure about this?" Mina asked Jae-sung as they prepared to depart. "The council could arrest you the moment we arrive." "They could," Jae-sung agreed. "But they won't, because we're not going to ask for peace. We're going to offer it." The Whisper made the journey without incident. Council patrols detected them, but did not interfere. Word had spread that humanity was sending representatives, and curiosity had replaced hostility, at least for now, on Apex Prime. The council chamber was packed not just with the official delegates, but with observers from across the galaxy. Young species that had been watching the war, seeing a newcomer stand against the ancient powers. Journalists from 100 worlds. Even some council citizens who had demanded to witness what would happen. Jae-sung stood in the center of the chamber, in the same spot where Dr. Hannah had stood months before when war was declared. But the atmosphere was different now. The contempt was gone, replaced by wary respect and in some cases fear. "The Galactic Council offered humanity terms," Jae-sung began. "We have considered them carefully. and we reject them. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Vrelian sovereign's body tensed. The Marathi high speaker's light pulsed with agitation. You reject peace? The sovereign asked. You would continue this war? We reject your terms, Jason clarified, but we offer our own. Not just to the Council, but to the entire galaxy. He gestured, and Baum activated the holographic display. It showed a new proposal, one that had been crafted over weeks of consultation with legal experts, diplomats, and representatives from neutral species. We propose the reformation of galactic governance, Jason continued. No more council that makes decisions for everyone. Instead, a federation of equal species. All races, old and young, would have a voice. Decisions would be made democratically, not by decree. The chamber erupted in shouts of disbelief and anger. The council delegates were outraged at the suggestion that their ancient authorities should be dissolved. But Jason noticed that many of the observers, representatives from younger species, were listening with interest. You have no right, the Marathi high speaker declared. The council has maintained order for thousands of years. You would destroy that because of your arrogance. Your order was built on fear and oppression, Baum said, stepping forward. You made rules that benefited the old species and kept young races in their place. You declared war on us for mining resources in space you claimed but never used. That's not order. That's tyranny. She activated another display, showing the evidence Hannah had collected. War crimes. Civilian casualties. Council ships deliberately targeting hospitals and schools. The systematic attempt to exterminate humanity, not for any crime, but simply for existing. This is what your order looks like, Baum said. We fought back because we had no choice. We survived because we refused to die quietly. And now we offer you a choice. The Vrelian sovereign rose to its full height, mandibles clicking furiously. You threaten us? With what? Your fleet is broken. Your worlds are damaged. You cannot force us to accept anything. Admiral Taiwan's face appeared on the display. Broadcasting from Earth, his image showed a man marked by war, scarred and exhausted, but unbroken. You're right, Taiwan said. We can't force you to accept peace. We can't force you to change. But we can make sure the galaxy knows what you are. Every species will see the evidence of what you did. They'll see how much it cost you to try to destroy us. And they'll ask themselves, if the Council did this to humanity, what would they do to us? It was a gamble. Humanity was betting that the Council's authority was already broken enough that this final push would shatter it completely. That other species would demand change rather than submit to rulers who had proven themselves willing to commit genocide. Intelligence. Officer Eugen had spent weeks preparing for this moment. At Taiwan's Sea,